the company who was supplying the fuel to the military in Somalia couldn't hack it. So they called in some hardcore res Indians, and now we're selling the fuel there.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Native Edge podcast. I am Chris James, President and CEO of the National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development, and I am with my co-host, Yvette Fielder. Introduce yourself, Yvette.
Hi, Yvette Fielder, and I'm a program director here at the National Center. Today we have a guest.
Go ahead, please.
Mr. Lance Morgan.
Lance Morgan. You've heard us talk about Mr. Morgan on previous podcasts, so it's super exciting to have Lance here. Lance, introduce yourself a little bit.
I'm Lance. I'm the CEO of Ho-Chunk Inc., the Economic Development Corporation of the Winnebago Tribe in Nebraska, and I'm a member of the tribe.
So Lance is known across Indian country and beyond for driving social and economic change through creative solutions to difficult problems. As founder and CEO of Ho-Chunk Incorporated, his leadership has grown a tribal business into a thriving national company, successfully diversifying the Winnebago tribe's revenue from gaming to create a growing middle class on the reservation. And I've known Lance probably about over a decade. We've known each other when my time in the federal government. So just, I think that was just a great introduction to really talk about who you are and what you do. So let's just start at the beginning. Yvette and I both heard, you've told us the story of Ho-Chunk and how it started in your apartment. Let's start there. Talk a little bit about that, and then we can get into other topics.
Okay. Well, I was a lawyer, and one of the clients was the Winnebago tribe, and I was that for a couple years. But we had a management company at our tribe's casino, and my job was to renegotiate a contract with them. But I ended up kind of kicking them out and keeping all the money for the tribe, which at the same time, the state of Iowa authorized additional gaming, and so we had about 2 years before competition was really going to kill us. And I had done a paper in law school on alternative development strategies for tribes, which that's how cool I was. And I had this idea that was the basis of Ho-Chunk Inc. And I said to the tribe, well, we should diversify. And they really weren't too into the idea because they had diversified in the 80s and had failed at everything. And so we just sort of figured out why everybody had failed and came out with a system of rules that's really become the model that a lot of tribes have used. And so I just quit my job. And I learned at the time, I wasn't married, but if you're going to quit your high profile legal job and move to the reservation, you should probably mention it to your girlfriend first. Anyway, and so I just had an apartment, a lonely apartment for a while. And that's where Ho-Chunk Inc. started. And I always tell people I became the CEO because I was the only employee. And so that's how it sort of goes, in that situation. So that's where we started in 1994. We had revenues of $400,000 that year. This year, it'll be $530 million in revenues. And I was the only employee, and we'll have a couple thousand employees this year. But we're really on a rocket ride. I think we're going to probably add another 200 million in the next couple of years, and probably another 2,000 or 3,000 employees. So things are going well in that area.
How many employees? Sorry, Chris.
We have 2,000 employees now, but we're opening 2 casinos in the next, couple of months. And then we have another one we have to open. And we're probably expected to add another maybe 800 or 900 employees in the other areas of our company too. So everything's growing really rapidly right now.
Back in 94, what was really the first product or first company that opened up? What did that look like?
We were going to be a real estate sort of company. We built some hotels and a few other, make some investments in apartments and that sort of thing. But that requires quite a bit of capital. And, the gaming, we knew it would be hit by competition. It wasn't hit, it was hammered. And so we lost 80% of our revenue at the tribe's casino. That isn't Ho-Chunk Inc. At the time was a non-gaming company. We were the diversification entity. And the tribe's casino laid off 300 people and profits dropped by 80%. And if you're going to be a real estate company with no money, then you're wasting your time. And so we had to shift. We shifted to sort of stereotype businesses of tribes where we had a tax advantage, cheap gas, cigarettes, that kind of thing. And once that got rolling, that really helped give us some additional capital. And then we got into government contracting. We bought a home manufacturing company using a model called the tribal leverage buyout, or the company where it used to pay what it used to pay in taxes, paid off the debt to buy the company. And so we've done that many times. But the federal contracting really took off and got very successful. And once we got more successful and started having capital again, we shifted back into the real estate, which was our original plan. And now we have a pretty diversified company. Government contracting is by far the biggest portion of it. Our largest assets are probably in real estate. And then out of the blue, we became a government contracting company. Not a government contracting, a casino company. It's called the Warhorse Casino, and that's a different story all to itself. But we weren't really planning on that. It's just something that popped up.
And you're also international. I know are you still in Afghanistan, Guam, and Mexico?
Well, we do stuff all over the world. We do some of the craziest things. I don't know if we're still doing it, but the company who was supplying the fuel to the military in Somalia couldn't hack it. So they called in some hardcore res Indians, and now we're selling the fuel there. But actually, we sent in our special ops, ex-special forces guys who were not native, but we sent them to Somalia. And so we'll do crazy things. We launched a satellite for the Mexican government that the State Department paid for because they wanted to track suspicious planes flying over the border, things like that. So we've really been all over the world in the government contracting side. State Department is a big client of ours. We're one of their largest contractors. And so that's been a big push for us. And we do hundreds of millions of dollars a year in that area.
So your story is the tribe had sort of tried some diversification. It didn't work out for them. You came on with this model. What was the conversation with leadership at the time to really get their buy-in? Because I know a lot of folks that might be listening, they're a lot of times, they see innovation, they see diversity, they hear, of experts like yourself, but they're like, when I have a conversation with counsel, it doesn't always go that way. What was that initial conversation that you had to help put things in play?
It didn't go that way either. I was kind of at the time, I was a lot younger, maybe 24 or 5. And I had just won, $30 million, my first case for them. And, I was the young tribal member who went to law school and came back. And so I was riding high. And then I said, I've got this idea for diversification and this tribal corporation. And I didn't really know what had happened in the 80s. This was like 1994 or 5. And they said, no, not again. And they said, this is a terrible idea. We've tried that and we've failed at everything we've done. And so they weren't into the idea. And I said, I think we can do it. And I said, why did we fail? And they didn't really want to talk about it. They said, well, go ask the people. And so Ho-Chunk Inc. is really based on failure. It's easy to legally, you can form a tribal corporation. You can have articles and bylaws, and ours are unique, tailored toward tribes. But that in itself doesn't do it. And what people don't understand about Ho-Chunk Inc. is that we have the secret sauce is sort of these principles that govern the interaction of the tribe and the corporation, and it's all decided up front. And when I'm a lawyer, I have legal clients that they're always trying to fix this after the fact. And these principles were not some eureka rocket science moment. I just went around and asked the people, so why did we fail? And the reason was, well, we fired the chairman's nephew. Or the other reason was, well, we spent all the money to pay our bills on the powwow. We never got our financials. We didn't have any control over any aspects of our money. And it was the same thing over and over again. I had like a little yellow legal pad and I just sort of summarized them. And so Ho-Chunk Inc. came up with a set of rules. And it's pretty simple. We just we got our money. You need a source of capital. Because if you go to the tribe, if you have to go to dad for money, then he's the boss, right? And so we got 20% of the gaming money for about 2 years to start us. And that was $9 million. And that was a lot for us then because we used to have a management company we got running. We had our own source of capital. We got to reinvest it with no dividends for 5 years. And then we gradually raised the dividends over time. So we have clear sort of capital usage needs. We also have our own accounting system, but in order to do that, you had to have a check and balance. We have our own audits and these kind of things. We have our own HR systems. So if you fire the chairman's nephew, maybe you can survive it, right? And the other thing that we did is we set up a board that we called a Goldilocks board. And at the time, the logic was no tribal council member should be on the board. And as a young lawyer, they were just setting up these gaming commissions, and the gaming commissions and the tribes are all at each other's throat. And except for my tribe, where the guy was so mad, he ran for council on the gaming commission. And every time there was a problem, he'd say, "That's not what happened," or "No, I'll check on it." And so if you know how you are, you got to integrate it into the system. And so our board structure is 5 board members, 2 council members, and a third tribal member for sure, and then 2 experts who have always been tribal members. But we have a just enough political balance so that they know what's going on, and then you have people who can advocate for you at that level. Otherwise, you get hauled in there and you're sitting in that little chair, and they're just saying mean things to you. And so that still happens, by the way. But it created a system of checks and balances and a place where the company had more of a voice in the council, and it worked. And there are probably several dozen tribes that model it almost exactly. And if I'd have known it was going to be so successful, that model, I look back at the original one, there's some typos in there I probably would have fixed. And we also then sort of invented the modern holding company LLC structure too, which is a nerdy thing to say, but most tribes are LLCs now. And we sort of created that from scratch to solve a tax problem in the late 90s. And so we're sort of the Johnny Appleseed of these tribal corporations, which is a weird thing to flex on, but it's just how it is.
Yvette, you're about to say something, I can tell.
No.
I think she's
so wanting to
stunned
say
by the
something.
boredom of that answer. Since I'm saying crazy stuff, this is something I brag about at Ho Chunk Inc. that nobody cares about. So when we first got into government contracting, the Alaska Natives entities the ANCs could form multiple entities. Tribes could not. We had to form separate ones, and we sued the government through administrative court and lost. And I wrote this. And our office was a little modular house back then. I remember sitting in the conference room writing this scathing letter saying, how many CEOs do you think we got around here? How many CFOs do you think we have? We have to consolidate resources, both physical, both capital and human resources to have a company. And they ruled against me. And then John Klein at the SBA said he read it and said it made a lot of sense. It wasn't fair. And they changed the regs. And they allowed tribes to form really modern holding company structures. And it was a little legal battle that we fought and lost in like 2001 or something like that, or 2. And what's weird about that, and I remember like reading it and going around telling everybody, yeah, I never was a litigator. I said, yeah, I won. Yeah, I was kind of bragging about it. Nobody cared. But I didn't realize that it would be the sort of the beginning of all of the tribes in the lower 48 getting into government contracting. And here's what's absolutely crazy about it. When the government came out with federal funding for COVID, they used that standard, that non-affiliation. And so all of our corporations could apply for it. And we got the largest amount of COVID funding in Nebraska. And I was kind of dodging the question. The reporter called, who are all these zip codes getting all this money? And it was a large amount of money. And I finally just leaned into it. I said, there's a map of us owning Wisconsin on my wall. And so as far as I'm concerned, the government owes us another couple billion. And then they just put that in the paper and went on. But you never know in Indian country what innovation will lead to. We fought for those structures. We fought for the ability to form multiple entities. And then 20 years later, we were able to get millions of dollars in COVID funding because they used that standard. All of Indian country was able to. And so it's sort of a weird thing that happened.
What's interesting about that story, people don't really realize almost every time you went to Washington was like a battle. It was not only a battle, but it was also an education, because it was all new going on. They were creating the programs existed, but they were trying to enhance the programs. So what you did was a legacy that supported, hundreds of companies and, millions and billions probably of dollars going into our community. So that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, all I was doing was trying to get by, but I think it goes to show you Indian country is a place where one person or a group of people or one company can really still make a difference because the rules, it's so much controlled by the rules and the system and the legal system that if you can adapt it, you can really do some good things. And I'm not saying it on here, but I'm up to a couple of things too. I'm still trying to change a rule or two, so
I can only
I could do
imagine.
it again. Yeah.
Well, and
I was going to
Yvette and I
say,
talk a lot about advocacy, and I think it's important for folks to approach things with like it's okay to ask for a change. It's okay to advocate for yourself or for your community or for a business. So I think I think the same way. I think there's constantly things I am trying to change to better our communities. I think that's so important.
I think what's weird about that is that as you grow and evolve, what you advocate for changes. When I was an intern at the tribe as a second year or third year law student or something, we went down. They took me down there because I was went to college and a law student. So they took me down to the Capitol, and had these signs, and we were walking around. And to be honest, people were polite, but they really wouldn't make eye contact with us. And it was very unsatisfying. And I've never been to another protest again because that's not how I want to. That's not how I want to approach change. And so we've been trying to co-opt the system in our world and to see if we can make it into a better place and actually take control of it. So advocacy's changed, right? Completely.
I was going to say, we talk a lot about access to capital at our Native Edge Institutes, but you brought up a great point that also bringing up the next generation of um, human capital is so important. When you talked about the two, access to capital and human capital, I mean, that's what we're doing in our communities, I hope, is that we're bringing up the next generation because they care about sustainability. How can they keep a roof over their head and food on the table and those things?
If you can get beyond just getting by and living, and we have a phrase in our community: in order to do one thing, you have to do everything. And we believe it. You can't just give somebody a job if they're not educated. You can't expect them to be educated if they're in a home that has substance abuse and they're sleeping on the couch, or in the living room and in overcrowded conditions. And so we really try to build our own communities. And when it comes to the young people, we really think generationally. And because we were a company, our town had 9 college graduates when we started. And in the last 20 years, the number has quadrupled. It's over 200. And what we've done is we couldn't really, we're not recruiting in Harvard MBAs to Winnebago, Nebraska, but everybody, I taught a class at this college, and everybody was smart, but we didn't do very well in my test. So I was not the greatest professor. I made them start over, but the entire semester at halfway point. And then I gave an oral final exam. They didn't let me teach anymore. But I realized that our people were smart, but they didn't know anything, or they didn't work very hard. And so, or they weren't expected to. And so what we did is we decided to play the long game. And we invest hundreds of thousands of dollars a year into internships, where we bring in our college students. Then if they're great in high school, they're called pre-terns. We now have an apprenticeship program for high school kids that we put kids throughout all the jobs in the community to see if they're interested. We have the scholarships and all the things you need to sort of develop people. And I was in a meeting of 7 people a month ago, and I realized that everybody in there was sort of middle management, had been an intern for us. And so we have 20 some interns a year now. And it's something we take a lot of effort into. And it's partly for us, but it's also partly to give them an opportunity to sit in a board meeting, to meet executives, to feel comfortable in that position. And so we've really gone all out in the human capital side, and it's paying monstrous dividends for us. Monstrous.
That's great. Because how many enrolled members still reside in the community?
We have 5,500 members, and we have about 2,000 in the neighborhood, the reservation, and then there's a city right near us, Sioux City. And so we have about 2,000 plus members in the area. And Ho Chunk itself has 2,000 employees. What's very weird is we still have poverty and we have unemployment, but we have more jobs than working age people right now. So it's an interesting dynamic.
And I think making that investment into your community, building that workforce, it obviously turns around to growing the company as well, because you're building you're building the managers, you're building the next CEO, you're really really focusing on that piece. So what do you think the next evolution of that growth is going to be?
I think that it really is the surviving the transition. The business, the power of it is to create a lasting organization, an institution that can impact a community. We've already identified our next CEO. He's 33 years old. We already know who he is. What's weird, he was probably 10th in our organization. And I said, he's going to be the guy when I'm gone. And everyone goes, huh, okay, that makes sense. Like nobody even cared. If it was a non-Indian company, people would have been undermining him or doing all these things. But he's the best of that generation. So, so it's everyone's job to teach him and to uplift him. And we've been progressing him through various jobs and things like that because he's a tribal member and he can do the math and he has the standing, in our world to be able to be an advocate, not just out in the world, but also in the community and at the tribal level, And so you better be able to say, hey, I've got something to say in a tribal council meeting. And in order to do that, you better be a member. And so we're really focused on that. And that's going to be the next test. And it's not just him. There's a dozen other people, in that 30-some range who we're training. And then we've got all our interns and we've got our eye on every one of them. I just met with them and I said, this is a test, right? And so we want to see who can take it. And if maybe they work for us, maybe they don't, but they've learned something and they're working somewhere else in our community. So our interns are everywhere right now, and they're all young professionals in our community, and we're giving them a place to live, a good job, a place to raise their families. And if you were to ever come to Winnebago, we built an entire town from scratch. That really is a model, I think, for social economic development.
We were there
Chris
with the
wasn't there.
Native Edge Institute.
I didn't get there. I've promised you for years, and Annette too. I'm like, I'm going to come visit you guys, and then of course my whole team comes and visits, but I don't get to come.
It's the Disneyland of Midwestern social economic development, tribes. The town is a new urbanism kind of town where you can walk around it safely. There's parks, there's cultural parts, there's businesses on the first floor and apartments on the second floor on this main street. And there's a bunch of flowers and trees and, it's just a weird place. And I had an intern from Oklahoma. Our manager for our casino operations is from Oklahoma. Her daughter came and worked. She said, it's like a dream. I couldn't even believe it. It didn't seem real to me because she'd spent a lot of time on reservations before.
And you have some ordinances that you put in place in order to keep the community.
Oh, yeah, we have rules. Oh, my parents live
Not
in
an HOA, but.
No, my parents live in there, and he was, for some reason, his leg was hurting, and he was parking in his front yard. And I had to talk to him about it. I said, what are you doing, Dad?
Well, I think
great.
that's building that model and that the housing, and it's not just the company. It's all of this holistic stuff that you guys have built, which is so important. And I think it can go sort of in our sort of next iteration of innovation. I do want to talk about the gaming aspect of it, because again, you guys have, please tell me about what you've done innovative around gaming, and even how you've sort of manage gaming for the whole state. So tell me a little bit about that.
So Ho-Chunk was formed sort of in crisis. Iowa was authorizing new casinos, and they were going to be highly competitive, and that's what hurt the tribe. We lost 80% of our revenue. And so the Ho-Chunk was formed to diversify our economic interest away from gaming. And Iowa just kept taking from us. They built a bigger boat in the Sioux City market. They built 3 casinos in the Omaha market. Then they put the casino on land, and it took from us. And every time they would do a study, and the study would talk about making sure it didn't hurt other casinos, except we weren't on that list. It was always about taking from us. And I had bought for Ho-Chunk Inc. a defunct racetrack in the on the Nebraska side. And we just said, we're going to buy it to shut it down, just in case Nebraska ever authorizes gaming at their racetracks. It's going to hurt us again. And after Iowa took the boat and put it on land, and we bid on it and didn't get it. I said, I'm so tired of Iowa taken from us. And in Nebraska, there is no gaming in Nebraska. So the Winnebago tribe is split by a river, and we have a casino that's pretty modest. It's nice size, but it's been minimized through competition. And I said, we're going to fire up gaming in Nebraska. And we've got this racetrack. And so we tried to do a constitutional amendment on the ballot. We didn't get enough signatures. It was terrible. Anyway, so we failed completely to get enough signatures. And 2 years later, the horse tracks asked if we would decide if we would do it again. And in Nebraska, there are 6 horse tracks. There's one in Omaha and Lincoln are the primary markets. And I said, look, I'm not going to go to the trouble of getting gaming approved on the off-reservation gaming approved and changing the Constitution unless we have a deal with you to build the casinos. And they said, okay. They had nothing to lose. They had been minimized too by Iowa. The horse tracks were almost out of business. And so in 2019, we decided we'd take a break because it was fall and we'd get the rest of the signatures in that spring. Then COVID happened. And so we needed 600,000 signatures during COVID, which was a difficult thing. We got on the ballot. The Secretary of State knocked us off the ballot. We went to the Nebraska Supreme Court in 4 weeks and got put on the ballot. And then the political powers tried to stop us. And we won with 69% of the vote. And so I remember when Trump won the presidency in 2016, he seemed surprised that he won and he hadn't really prepared for it. That was us when we won the election now we have the right to build 3 casinos. I had done nothing to prepare for it. I didn't know if I was going to win. And the next day I woke up and said, oh my goodness, we're dominating off-reservation gaming in Nebraska. And so we just started hustling, designing them, getting the financing, everything. And we've opened a temporary facility in Lincoln that we will double the size of in November. And our Omaha facility, and it's 1 million people there, will open August 6th. And then another phase of it will open next spring. And we're going to build one in Sioux City too. I just don't have the money at the moment. And so somehow or another, we've, even though we're not a gaming company, we just sort of worked our way in to having what is essentially a monopoly in Omaha and Lincoln, and we'll be part of a very competitive Sioux City market. But it's fascinating, and for not being a gaming company, I mean, we're pretty proud of it.
Yeah. What's amazing about that model too that you did, what the amount of economic impact you will have, or Ho-Chunk will have for the whole state is it's going to be pretty significant, based on, the 3 gaming facilities, the amount of jobs that'll be created. Talk a little bit about your footprint in the state and the surrounding states.
Well, we did an economic impact study, and we're a big contributor, especially in Northeast Nebraska. And one time I told the governor, this was years ago, I said, we're the largest English-speaking employer in Northeast Nebraska because we have a lot of meat packing plants and we have a lot of people from all around the world. And he laughed, and later he said, don't say that to me in front of cameras, because he couldn't stop laughing. He's my neighbor, so we get along fine. But so when Ho-Chunk first started, there was no box for a tribal corporation on the tax exempt form. And we had a $2,000 tax bill, and I spent 4 years and $50,000 fighting that tax. And we finally got it ruled that we don't have to pay that tax. And every time we owed a tax at all, I wouldn't sign it. I said, it's against my religion, so they'd have to stamp the check. And now I'm about to be the largest taxpayer in the state of Nebraska because of this casino thing. And so I told somebody, I said, I've changed my religion. It's one thing to fight over a little tax bill. It's another to be able to dominate gaming. And we're going to have, we're going to hire a couple thousand people. We'll pay $100+ million in state taxes, and we'll have 300, 400 million in revenue off reservation. And we already were a big company in Nebraska, but we were viewed as sort of an outside company. And for some reason, states don't think of tribes as partners. If you go to Oklahoma, the state of Oklahoma will do anything to help oil and gas, but they don't mind fighting the tribes. And I remember when Mohegan and the Pequots were in Connecticut, they were doing mean things to them. They would never do that to the insurance companies there, the Hartford or something like that. They would never dream of doing that kind of thing. But for some reason, our food is still on the table for somebody to take a bite of. And so what we are trying, and since I've seen all that happen, we're trying to politically be smart and make sure we build the relationships and they understand that we're helpful for the state. And rather than an outside Vegas company taking all the money and taking it back to Vegas, our campaign is keep the money in Nebraska. And I tell them that Ho Chunk's actual reason for existence is to take gaming money and diversify it into the community. And so really we're just doing it on a much larger scale, and our community is now Nebraska. So I think that's resonating as we gain more sort of notoriety, and as the tax money really starts to flow, I think we will have ended up, essentially co-opting the system that persecuted us. So I still think, though, we're still a little bit outsiders. And maybe I like that because it gives me an edge in my approach. But
Any big party opening, ribbon cutting coming up?
We're going to have a soft opening because I'm afraid we don't know what we're doing. We're going to open up the doors and people will show up. And then we're going to have a big grand opening in the next phase of the casino in Omaha. But there's a center bar, and I'm not really much of a drinker, but I've been working on this for 6 years, mostly with failure and now just the stress of it. And I cannot wait to sit. I can't gamble because we're the license holder. I cannot wait to sit at that bar and have a drink. And I know that's probably not appropriate, but I just want to survey all the work, and I want people coming in and giving us their quarters, our dollars, hopefully. So I want to see that happen. And I'm going to take a moment and then sort of assess it and then get right back to work. But that's what I'm really looking forward to, that moment.
I think that's great advice for anybody. A lot of times, as a business owner or a leader, you don't take that minute just to sit and look and say, hey, we did this, or, so I think that's, for anyone to really take that moment. I think that it's super good and healthy advice, because you'll be able to take it all in, say, hey, this is great. But then you always say, you know what? I think what's my next step? So I commend that, and I'm truly going to take that to heart, because I think that's so important to really, for all of us, to take a step back and look at whatever we've done. If that's graduating high school or college, or if that's being a parent, or if that's building a almost multi-billion-dollar organization. Pretty amazing.
If you're going to be the CEO, you better be worried about what's next, right? Because I tell people my job is to see the future and predict it and then control it, And so I'm always, and I'm criticized by people sometimes who are friends of mine, and they'll say, you need to enjoy the moment. And I will try, but I'm sure I'll be worried about the next phase and refinancing this horrible debt I'm in and things like that. My cousin, his name's Nate Bigfire. And anyway, so Nate says, hey, we're having a sweat. Come on down. And I said, I'm still working. And I'm sweating the details. And he thought that was pretty clever, But I said, I didn't really want to go in there, because if I go in there, they're going to try to kill me. They're going to make it too hot.
Not open the flaps.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to say two things. I want to say congratulations, and I want to say thank you, because you have created a lot of models, and I don't know if anybody ever says thank you to you.
Sometimes, I had the strangest thank you once. I got like a blanket and lunch, and I was at a meeting in Omaha at the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting, and the natives were protesting. And Warren Buffett, that's his meeting, and I have a bit of I know him a little bit, and he said, "What are they mad about?" I said, "I'll go find out." And so I come back in, and he said, "What do they want?" I said, "They want that power company you bought in Oregon or California. There's a dam there that's messing up their salmon run. They want you to get rid of it." And he goes, "Well, is it a big deal?" I said, "It's nothing to you. It's everything to them." And he says to his guy, I wish I had this kind of power. We should do something about that. And they removed the dam. And now they have some salmon running and stuff. So this tribe, they gave me like a blanket, bought me lunch. I'm like a hero out there, but I didn't really do much. And so,
Chris, we don't have a blanket.
but it makes a difference, though. I'm really happy about that, because what I saw in that moment was what power can do. I mean, tribes have a lot of wishes, but you have to have the organization, you have to have the count, you have to have the capital, and you can make awesome stuff happen if you're not limited by some rule or something. If you don't have to ask, if you can do it yourself, and that's kind of where we're going.
I want to continue on how you have been innovative and diversified a little bit. Just recently, there was a Supreme Court, or there's been multiple cases around sports betting and electronic gaming, and the Seminole Nation just recently won a case because the Supreme Court did not choose to take on the case. Talk a little bit about what you have done with the companies or around electronic betting and gaming.
I really appreciate that question, because it's the tribes are not getting a fair deal on this issue, and the federal government, they didn't really say for a long time, the NIGC, they didn't say it's all about if the server is on the reservation, can you do mobile sports betting throughout the whole state. And then in the end, they said, well, it's up to the state and the compact. So you took which is the system from the 90s and the 80s, I suppose, the late 80s and the early 90s. But you're talking about the internet era. And what's happened in sports betting is essentially it's an oligarchy. And if you're not one of the top four, then you're really not involved. And so it's kind of like a speed or a land grab. And the tribes are not equipped through IGRA to do the land grab. And if the state does authorize it, they're gonna hook up their own entities. If you look what happened in Arizona, there's no tribe in the top five. And I think one of the number five the number five provider was Wynn, and they left because it wasn't worth it. So if you're not in the top four, it really isn't a good deal. So the tribes in Arizona were sort of left out in a lot of different horrible ways, I think. I don't want to get into it. And then if you look what happened in the state of Michigan, it was open, and some of the tribes signed up one of the big four, and they've done great. But none of it has to do with through the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. It's all through the state system. And the other thing that's happened is a rural entity, and in this case in Michigan, it was a rural tribe up in Upper Michigan, signed up with DraftKings and did $1 billion in revenue. So the internet allows you to leapfrog some of the geographic sort of limitations of some tribes. And so watching that all play out in Nebraska, sports betting was not why we did gaming, but we had 3 casinos. And the fourth one was going to be Caesars, and they're one of the 4. And the other 3 are BetMGM, DraftKings, and FanDuel. And so I decided that we should dominate it. And so we've signed up at MGM in Sioux City and FanDuel in Omaha and DraftKings in Lincoln. And so that will give us 80% of the market. And it's state regulated, so it'll be taxed. But it's a $1.5 billion market estimated in Nebraska. And so it's not even legal there. And so we've prospectively signed them up. And they didn't necessarily want to do it, a few of them. And I said, if you don't sign with me, then I'll make sure it never happens. And I said, ask around, right? I was mad. I don't know if I could stop it, but I acted like I could, right? Puffing up, so now we're all for it. And I had a meeting with one of the companies recently. And in Florida, since the Seminoles had a monopoly position, the big companies, the big 4, sued them to try to stop them. And in California, they did something similar. They fought each other, and it was a big mess. And so my advice to this gaming company was sign up a tribe prospectively. And then the tribe wins regardless, whether you can do it through the compact and IGRA, or if you do it through the state system, it's extra revenue to the tribe. And then the tribes, instead of fighting you, will sign up. And so I suggested that strategy. They then thanked me for giving them some strategic advice, but I said, I didn't do it for you. I mean, I don't want the tribes to be left out, because you look at a place like Arizona, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and the tribes are getting the crumbs of it, and it's ridiculous, since we're the pioneers of the gaming in this state. And so, anytime you have innovation like that, you have the opportunity to really figure out how to play it. But what was interesting is I knew nothing about. I'm not a gaming executive, and I didn't know anything about gambling other than I just bet on the Huskers every time, or against Iowa. That's kind of my move, and my daughter went to Arizona State, so I bet on them too, which was a bad idea lately also. And also I'm not very good at it, but the states are kind enough to publish on their websites all the data. So you can see what happened in Michigan. You can see what a royal tribe did. You can see what happened in Iowa. And you can see what happened in Arizona. And so the models are all out there. And all I had to do was sort of figure out how to play it to benefit us, given our particular situation. So I'm pretty proud of it, although it's not legal yet. We're hoping to make it legal this year on the 2024 ballot. And when it happens, we will have 1.2 billion of the market, and then it whittles down to a very small amount to us, but it's extra. And so I'm hoping it works.
I think it could be a destination.
Yeah. Yeah. Come bet on,
Right?
come bring your phone and bet
Well,
in Nebraska.
I mean, think about it. There's a lot to do in Nebraska.
Yeah. Oh, maybe. I think that
To
the
create, to be
casinos will be a destination. Nebraska's economically very successful state, and so there's, I don't know if it's a tourist attraction, but Omaha has a few things. But hopefully our casino is called the Warhorse Casino. And hopefully that'll be one of the big attractions in the state soon.
Lance, I got just one more question, and then we'll wrap it up. We have a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to the show, and what is if? And I guess you could look at it two ways. You could look at an entrepreneur or someone that's wanting to start, maybe even maybe a tribe that's looking at starting a venture. What's your number one piece of advice? And so that's the first question. The follow-up question would be, what would you tell them not to do?
I think that if you're going to do a tribal company, the main thing is to be smart up front. Although I've made a lot of money in my law firm helping to fix things after the fact, it's a pretty lucrative business, but it'd be a lot better if you just structured it in a way that your board was structured right, your checks and balances were right, and then you gave it the best chance to succeed in a really difficult, politically charged environment. What tribes do is they just form articles and nobody reads them, and they just sort of say, all right, let's get started, without any sense of where the money's going to come from, who's going to run what. And they almost invariably fail. And the second thing is, you got to survive the first election. The person who gets the company started, unless it's a political person who's been going to be there 20 years, they come and go, right? Some of the political leadership. And so a lot of tribes call me or come visit me when they're struggling with the next election, because, you've got to really educate your political leaders at all times and think of it as a constant sort of process to get them to buy in and engage. And so there's a honeymoon period. Then there's the what the hell's going on period. And then you can get to the sustainability and to be clever. And the reason I like the sports betting story is because I didn't know anything about sports betting. And I grinded away for months trying to figure out the strategy. And my original strategy was to try to do it myself and keep them out. Then I realized that I was not going to be an internet billionaire. I didn't know how to do it. And so I decided that I had to let the foxes in the hen house, but also to control them. But that's just hard work and trying to figure it out and I'm an experienced business person, and I'm not afraid to admit I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And as far as the financial terms on that, by the way, I hired some expert from England where sports betting is big, so that I wouldn't get tricked on the financial side of the deal. I understood the legal and strategy, but I didn't have any clue how it worked on the math. And so I think that you got to be humble and hardworking, and that usually leads to success and good luck.
Wow. Great words of wisdom. Lance Morgan, thank you so much for being part of our Native Edge podcast. We really appreciate your many, many years of friendship, not only with me, but with the National Center. Yvette, final words.
Oh, thank you for being here. I know it's 107 degrees outside, but we appreciate you stopping in our humble abode here in Arizona. And we'd love to hear the story when you do open.
Well, August 6th, I think I'm running out of money, so I better it can't get here. So I have like a countdown clock, but it's actually is for July 15th because I don't know how to reset it. But it's down to like 40 days, I think, total. And you guys, I just want to say one thing. You guys do a great job. And the role that you've taken on is big. And when I was a young person, I gave a speech in front of like 20 people at Disneyland for the Res conference out in Anaheim. And, everybody was polite, but nobody was really listening or cared, I don't think. But to see the evolution to what's going on now and the role that you guys play in Indian country, to just even getting people together and doing those kind of things, it's super impressive to see what's evolved. So
Thanks.
I appreciate it.
Well, we
21 staff.
We appreciate it, that's for sure. And, without strong leaders like yourself to support us, and thank you to our audience for supporting us. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, so every dime that we make as an organization, we put right back into our programs and to our communities. So we really appreciate. Thank you, Lance, Morgan. Thank you, Yvette. And thank you for listening to the Native Edge podcast. I will see you next time on the Native Edge.